What is up, everyone? Prometheus here. Today I'd like to talk about a film that I think it's been a long time coming since I make since I've made this video, or it's been a long time coming for me to make this video. Today I'd like to talk about Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. You all know it, the final film of the Skywalker saga, and one that people often really don't like. Now, I bet you're wondering, what do I think about the film and how would I rate it? Well, if you're coming here to hear a unique opinion on the film, you're gonna be disappointed because if I'm gonna be honest, I don't like the film. I really don't like the film. I really, really, really don't like the film. Even if I'm looking at this at a critical standpoint, like completely objective, without any of my opinions, like completely unbiased, without any of my opinions influencing my score for this. Like, I'm gonna give a final score for this movie at the end of the video that isn't influenced by my personal score, by my personal opinion. So I'm gonna give it an objective score, and then I'll give a subjective score that is influenced by my opinions. But it's it's not good. In fact, there's a lot of aspects of this film that are just genuinely, absolutely terrible. In fact, I'm gonna say it, but Rings of Power is better than Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, like Lord of the Rings is my favorite media franchise ever. Like, Rings of Power is a disgrace to it. Season 2 is a bit better, but even then, it's like a 6, maybe low 70s. But then Season 1 was like 5 or 6 out of 10, I don't know. But this, man, let me tell you, if I listed everything about this film that just doesn't work, this video would be 5 hours long. But I'll just simplify it. First, I'll go over what I think is good about this film, because this film isn't completely worth this, and in the end, there is worse films. Let's see. The visuals are good, like the CGI, special effects, they're all really good. That's something that's good across the entire sequel trilogy. Something I unfortunately can't say for some of the effects in the prequel trilogy, but the original trilogy's practical effects are still obviously the best in the franchise. But the CGI and special effects in these films are actually really good. The action in this movie is still really good. And although I definitely have a lot of problems with how the characters are done, I think the acting is still pretty solid. Like, Kylo Ren is still a really well acted character, though Rey, although I also think the performance up from her actor is still solid. Yeah, she's one of my main problems. She's the worst protagonist in the entire franchise, and I bet we all agree with that because, one, yeah, sure, she's a strong female character, but she's also kind of a Mary Sue type of character where she's completely capable. And by the end of this film, I don't think she was worthy of becoming the most powerful Jedi ever. She says, "I am all the Jedi." When I saw that scene, I just shrugged, like, you don't deserve that title. There are so many other Jedis who have worked so much harder, like Obi-Wan Kenobi. They have suffered. They have worked tirelessly. You've only been a Jedi for like a few less than just a few years. I don't know how much, like, the amount of time these movies take over, but it's got to be at least a few years. I don't know how long she's been a Jedi, but it is nowhere near as long or as hard as it was for the other Jedis in the previous films and other pieces of Star Wars media. Like, yeah, she suffers a lot. She goes through a lot of things, but like it doesn't work. Like, she is not, she's strong, but I feel like she doesn't deserve to be called a Skywalker. Like, it doesn't work. Another thing that I didn't like, if you haven't seen this film, which sorry about this, but spoilers, she's Emperor Palpatine's granddaughter, and that twist could have worked. It honestly could have worked, but the way they executed it was really underwhelming and disappointing. Like, it could have worked so much better, but it feels pointless. Speaking of Palpatine and pointless, I don't understand why they brought back Emperor Palpatine, and I bet a lot of people really don't like that. Like, There was no reason to bring him back. They could have just kept the villains from the previous movies. Like, he was already completely just obliterated in Return of the Jedi. He was a great villain in the previous prequel trilogy and in this and in the original trilogy. Like, he was a great villain in those films. In this final film, like, sure, I guess his design's kind of cool, but really, I don't see the appeal of why they should have brought it back. Nostalgia bait. Another thing about this film, nostalgia bait and fan service all over this film. It's all over it. That, like, if this movie wanted to be a love letter or just a complete mess of fan service and just nostalgia bait, it succeeded, and that kind of hinders the film a lot. Another thing, the story and structure and how everything's written, it's terrible. It's genuinely terrible. This has the worst story in the entire Star Wars franchise. Like, there's just so much payoff, but not too much work to get through it. There's so much plot conveniences in this film. Like, the Death Star thing, where that blade is kind of like the Death Star. Like, I forgot about it. Like, I just wish I could forget this film. I wish Force Awakens was a good film. It wasn't the best sequel, but it was a good movie. And but Last Jedi, as many problems as it has, and as much as it tests my patience, it wasn't the worst thing ever. I mean, it's definitely better than Rise of Skywalker, but it's definitely one of the weaker Star Wars movies. But this is the bottom of the barrel for the Star Wars franchise. Just the story, the structure. I won't go over it all here, but there's just so much, like, just detours it takes. Too many things that the plot does. Conveniences, character choices. It's so many things I can complain about with the story and the writing and just how much payoff and how, like, when I watched this when it came out, I was a tad bit younger, but still sensible. Like, I thought that certain scenes were cool. I thought the final battle was pretty cool, but now that I think about it, all those people just arriving there, that was just a plot convenience to make all the people win. Like, honestly, realistically, if it was just the rebels on their own, they wouldn't have been able to beat that large army the Sith had. It's too many plot conveniences, so much fan service, nostalgia bait, and just different and horribly written characters and so many things that could have been really good, but weren't executed really well. And that final scene that just really hits you in the gut and really tells you how disrespectful, how insulting this is to the Star Wars formula, to the Star Wars brand, is that final scene where she says, Rey Skywalker. Because honestly, Rey is not worthy of the Skywalker name. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Oh, Obi-Wan isn't. I mean, Luke Skywalker, Leia Skywalker, Anakin even. Although he was evil, he redeemed himself. They were all worthy of being great masters. Rey, she's a good person, but she does not go through as much as those guys did to become the Jedi Master that they did. Like, she is one of my least favorite characters in the Star Wars franchise. Speaking of bad characters, the ginger Empire commander guy, I forgot his name because I forget a lot about this film because I really don't like it. He's not a good character. He was built up to be like this. He was built up to be like Space Hitler in the previous Force Awakens film, and then in this one, turns out he's a spy or he's a traitor or something. I don't care if the rebels win. I just want to see the Empire lose. Blah, blah, blah. I don't care. It is just, there is so much in this film that just tests my nerve. Just absolutely, just. The only good things in this film have nothing to do with the story and structure. Just visuals. That's it. Everything else sucks. I haven't seen the original Clone Wars, which people are saying is terrible. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not as bad as this film, because honestly, this film is trash. Like, even objectively speaking, it's still a really bad movie. It's, like, the only good aspects are the visuals. That's it. Nothing else. It's disappointing. Like, I was already like all the problems I had with the previous Last Jedi, and even Force Awakens, which I think was good. Like all the problems the sequel trilogy had previously, all culminate into the worst movie in the Star Wars franchise by a long shot. Like the prequel trilogy had some pretty bad movies. The first two, Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, they were probably bad, pretty bad. But at least they had some good elements to them. Revenge of the Sith was actually a good film. Um, and even Phantom Menace, which probably a bad film, has good scenes in it. Obi-Wan Kenobi is consistently good. Kylo Ren in the sequel trilogy was good, but in this film, I think he's at his weakest. And even some of the good scenes we get with him, it just it's so many disappointing things, so many things they did with characters. It is just I really don't like this movie. In fact, this is gonna sound absolutely crazy, but I think the Star Wars movie franchise should have ended after the original trilogy. Like, I'm serious. Like, I don't care if we don't get KOTOR. Like, KOTOR, I think, like, even objectively, I think objectively KOTOR is probably the best piece of Star Wars media. But even better than the original trilogy. Yeah, that's right. It has a great story, great gameplay and RPG elements, and a great twist and mechanics and everything. It's all fantastic. This embodies everything bad about the franchise. It doesn't work. So many things in this film don't work. And I honestly can't, it frustrates me beyond repair how much of a misfire this film is. How much of a misfire the sequel trilogy is. Like, yes, Force Awakens was good, but the other two weren't so much. So, yeah, if we're looking at this film at a critical standpoint, if I had to give it a score, I'm going to have to give it a 4 out of 10. It gets some points for having good visuals, solid acting, and good action, but that's about it. And if I was being subjective, like personal score, this film insults me so much that I'm going to have to give it a 2 out of 10. Because the only thing I liked about this film, again, was the action. It looked nice. That's about it. And how do I put this? I understand why George Lucas, I think he said that he didn't like what they did with it, but I can understand that. Disney, they never should have sold Star Wars to Disney. They never should have done it. It was one of the worst choices in cinema history. Like, sure, we got Andor, which I think is the best Star Wars TV show and one of the best pieces of Star Wars media. Sorry, I had to take a drink there, but anyways, yeah, in the end, it really is just an insulting film. It doesn't work. That's all I really had to say. I might make another video in analyzing different aspects of it, but for now, just stick to the original trilogy, and prequel trilogy has good elements. Stick with that too, but honestly, if you don't want to watch the sequel trilogy, that's fine. Like, Force Awakens is good, but it's fine if you miss it. Like, you're not missing much with this trilogy, and I think I'm saving you from, you're saving yourself from the how insulting this film is to the Star Wars formula, Star Wars brand. If you want peak Star Wars, play Knights of the Old Republic. It is the best piece of Star Wars media ever. Both in my opinion and just from a critical or objective standpoint. You just can't get better than KOTOR. It has the best story, best writing, and it's epic too. Like, you can't top KOTOR. The only thing that could top is his upcoming remake, which I am really excited for. No, I don't really know which year it is, but when it comes out, it's going to be Game of the Year of whatever year it comes out. Like, I'm thinking maybe 2026. I don't care if the Elder Scrolls 6 comes out. KOTOR's Game of the Year. It's Game of the Year. Speaking of Elder Scrolls 6, Todd Howard, please hurry up. I am waiting. I mean, yeah, I respect Todd Howard. He's done some things that really have irritated me, but I still think the good things he's done really outweigh those. Why am I talking about Todd Howard? I went from talking about Star Wars to Bethesda games. Okay, back on topic. Yeah, Star Wars Rise of Skywalker sucks. And if you like it, that's fine. Like, don't take my word for it, but if you want to avoid this film, that's fine. If you want to watch it, if you like it, that's totally fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But don't go in expecting the best Star Wars movie ever made. If you want that, just go watch the original trilogy. And probably stick to it as well, because no other Star Wars movie has ever been better than the original trilogy. Like, I'm going to say this is going to be a hot take, but I think The Acolyte is a little better than Rise of Skywalker. That's right, yeah, The Acolyte sucks. But I think it's a little better than Rise of Skywalker. That's just speaking to how bad this movie is. Like, I'm worried for the future of this franchise. Like, Andor Season 2 I'm excited for. I think the video game franchise has a lot of bright future ahead. Like, sure, Star Wars Outlaws kind of sucked. But the KOTOR remix coming out, I think there's gonna be a new a new Survivor game. Star Wars, a new Star Wars Jedi game. Like, those are good. The video game franchise has a good future, so long as they get the franchise out of the hands of Ubisoft. Uh, Andor Season 2 looks like it could be good. Mandalorian and Grogu could be a charming, solid adventure film, but if I'm going off of what I think about Mandalorian Season 3, it also could fall into the problems, because, yeah, Season 1 and 2 of Mandalorian were good. Season 3 sucked. But not only is Rise of Skywalker the worst Star Wars movie, it's one of the worst pieces of Star Wars media. There's probably worse pieces of Star Wars media, like the Christmas special. Like, that honestly makes this look like the Mona Lisa. But this is honestly just... Ugh. It insults me, it insults the Star Wars brand, it insults almost all the fans, except for the ones who may like it, which is fine. If you like this film, that's totally fine. Like, I grew up watching Star Wars. Like, I loved it as a kid. My dad loved it. My grandparents loved it. My entire family loved this franchise. Some of my family members like this film, and you know what? That's totally fine. But I don't, because it is an insult to the franchise. Like, Return of the Jedi was, like, the final films in each trilogy they're a mixed bag. Like, Return of the Jedi, probably the weakest in the original trilogy, but still a great film. Still one of my personal top 3 Star Wars movie, and maybe even just one of the top 3 best Star Wars movies objectively. Return of the Sith, I'd say, is probably like the 4th or 5th or 6th best Star Wars film. I don't know how to rank it. I think the top 3 Star Wars films would be Return of the Jedi at number 3, New Hope at number 2, and of course Empire Strikes Back at number 1. 4th, like, Rogue One was really, really good. I like that one. I'd have it like 4th or I'd put it at 4th place. 5th would be like Revenge of the Sith. Like, it's a good film, has really, really good things in it, but it definitely has some other problems. The prequel trilogy has. 6th place, I'd probably rank, like, Force Awakens, probably, because, yeah, Force Awakens is a good film, but it isn't the best sequel. Definitely the best in the trilogy, like a 7 or 8 out of 10, but, man, it definitely has its problems. And then the rest of there's only... I'm going to say it, there's only 7 good movies in the Star Wars franchise. Only 7. The original trilogy, Revenge of the Sith, Rogue One, Force Awakens, and Solo Star Wars Story, which was solid. I mean, it's not perfect, but it was solid. The rest of them are bad movies. Like, I grew up thinking this was one of the greatest movie franchises of all time. It still is, but it ranks a bit lower because only 7 out of the 12 if you count Clone Wars movie. 7 out of the 11 or 12 movies are good, while the rest kind of suck. Yeah, well, that's what I think about Rise of Skywalker and some of the other Star Wars movies. I can do videos on other Star Wars movies, like I might do one on the original trilogy. Might do a video on KOTOR, which I think is one of the greatest video games ever made. And speaking of greatest video games ever made, I actually might make a video on what is objectively the greatest video game of all time. Like, uninfluenced by any of my opinions, any of other people's opinions, just looking at it completely objectively and critically. I'll do that video soon, but for now, you're gonna leave this video knowing that my opinion on this film is not so different from other people's. I think it sucks. I think it's the worst Star Wars movie, and I just think it's a really big insult to what George Lucas had originally created. I feel so bad for what George Lucas saw Disney do to his children. When I say children, to this movie franchise. Because George Lucas is a great director, and it's so sad seeing his acclaimed franchise be handled so poorly by Disney. And I used to love Disney. Like I grew up watching on VHS, and we had a large just shelf of Disney movies. We had Disney Plus before it existed. And now these days I'm disappointed by Disney because of the choices they've made. Corporate Disney, the wokeness. Like, they've done some good things. Like, Disney's made some good movies recently showing that they are learning. I think their upcoming Moana 2 could be good, and they might be returning to form. But what they've done with some the other franchises they own really infuriates me. And it just frustrates me beyond extent. Yeah, George Lucas is one of the greatest movie directors of all time. And to see his franchise be so just made into this garbage is so sad. Like, I really feel bad for George Lucas. I respect him as a director. Like, he may have been involved. I think he might have been involved with some of these films, but even then, I still don't blame him for what happened. I blame Disney. In fact, I blame Disney for a lot of things, including the stock market crashes, which are big problems right now. Honestly, they're wasting their money on mediocre products. What happened to actually making art? What happened to making some of the greatest animated movies of all time? Speaking of greatest animated movies, I'll do a video on that too. The Boy and the Heron actually kind of moved down for me. It's still a 10 out of 10, but I actually think that some Ghibli films are a bit better. Star Wars, on the other hand, yeah, this is ranked. I haven't seen the Clone Wars, but I don't think I'm going to include it in my ranking. I'm just going to include the live action ones, but yeah, this is last place. D tier Star Wars movie. Just I'm going to say it, it's worse than KSI's new song. And I listened to that song. I don't think it's as bad as some people are saying it is, but I still think it's bad. Like, but this is worse. This is worse. This is worse than Rings of Power. This is worse than KSI's song. It's worse than The Acolyte. This is going to be a hot take. This is not going to be a good. This is not going to go well for some. This is not going to sound well for some people, but I'm going to say it. Prepare for yourselves, but I think that Rise of Skywalker is worse than Madame Web. It's worse than Joker 2. And those are some of the most disappointing movies. I mean, we knew Madame Web would be bad, but we didn't know it would be that bad. And we were so excited for Joker 2, but we were disappointed, and it ended up being bad. But with Joker 2, at least we're entertained by its badness. Whereas with this film, I get nothing out of it other than the action. I'm serious. Like Joker 2, it's like a 5. I'd give it like a 5, 4.5 out of 10, maybe a 5 out of 4.5, maybe 4.5. And Madame Web would also be maybe a 4 out of. Actually, I don't think. Actually, no. Madame Web's worse than Rise of Skywalker, but Joker 2 is better than this piece of crap. Like, Joker 2 is a bad movie. It's a really disappointing and really terrible movie. But I think it's a little better than this one. Because at least Joaquin Phoenix gives a good performance. Whereas, yeah, this film has good performances, but the characters are bad. Yeah, characters are bad in Joker 2. But, Joker 2, at least it has Joaquin Phoenix. I will give it that. I mean, this film has Adam Driver, who's a great actor, but Joker 2 just. I don't know why I think Joker 2 is a bit better, but there's some aspects that kind of stack up against it. And just. Yeah. Why watch this when you could be watching something like. When you. What. You do yourself a favor. Instead of watching the sequel trilogy, just play KOTOR. I think I said that before, but just play KOTOR and just witness peak Star Wars. Like, honestly, I could rant all day about this film and just how much just character work and how it is handled so poorly. This is my least favorite movie of all time. Yeah. I've seen worse movies, but I still like them better than this one, because at least I'm entertained by their badness. Whereas with this one, I'm insulted. If I were a film teacher and I was giving good examples of a good movie and a bad movie, for a good film, I would probably use an example like Lord of the Rings or The Godfather. Probably Lord of the Rings because those are my favorite movies. Godfather, if I wanted to give like a legitimate piece of art, like Lord of the Rings is art for sure. Like my favorite movies of all time. Speaking of Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy is the best movie trilogy of all time. That's unsurprising. It's almost unanimously considered that. It's better than the original Star Wars trilogy. Like, the original Star Wars trilogy is great, but the Lord of the Rings trilogy is something else. The only other movie trilogies I think come close are, of course, the original Star Wars trilogy, the Dollars trilogy with Sergio Leone, the cowboy films, you know them, and the Dune trilogy could come close if Dune Part 3 is really good as well, and that's about it. The Godfather trilogy could have been the best movie trilogy of all time if it weren't for Godfather Part 3 just being all right. Because I actually think it's all right. Like, it has some legitimately horrible aspects to it, but it has some good aspects. I liked, like, Michael Corleone's still good, and it's definitely better than Rise of Skywalker, for sure. But if that film was good, then it would have been the best movie trilogy of all time. There's a lot of upcoming movie trilogies, like the Spider-Verse trilogy is going to be completed soon. It could be one of the best trilogies. The Demon Slayer trilogy could have been great. The Demon Slayer Infinity Castle trilogy could be great, but the sequel trilogy is probably one of the weakest movie trilogies I've ever seen. The first movie was bad. The first movie was good. The other ones weren't really that good. Rise of Skywalker is the crowning jewel in this tower, in this crown of crap. I don't think that was a good use in words, but case in point, Rise of Skywalker is not good. The only good things is the visuals. Everything else sucks. Plot conveniences, too much fan service. The characters aren't written well. It's disappointment. Like, if I had to give an example of a bad film in a film class, this would be it. There are worse movies, but at least with some of those films, I'm entertained by how horrible they are. Whereas this, again, I've said this before, I am just absolutely insulted. Nothing anyone could say to me or do to me would insult me as much as this film did on my second viewing. I watched it when I was a bit younger. Well, I was still older, but I was still young. Well, technically, I am younger. I watched it in 2019. I was still a bit. I forgot. I watched it in 2019. I thought I liked it, and then I watched it again a few years later when I was a bit more like stronger in my movie and critic. Because back then I was more focused on like. Back then I was more focused on other things, but when I developed more of a movie goer mind, and I watched it again, This film is the biggest insult to me, and I bet it's probably a really big insult to George Lucas as well. I cannot stress this enough how embarrassing this film is to the Star Wars formula, Star Wars plan. That's all I gotta say for now. But if you like Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, that's totally fine. This is just my opinion and also my critical view of the film, uninfluenced by what like my personal biases. But even without personal bias, even looking at it critically, it's still a bad movie nonetheless. It is a bad movie subjectively and objectively. And just I'm worried for the Star Wars brand. And yeah, this film came out like nearly 6 years ago. I can't believe 2025 is already coming. But yeah, it's sad. I honestly feel like crying because this film legitimately just sucks so hard on so many different levels. I expect better from you, Disney. I know this was already nearly 5-6 years ago, but I'm still hurt. You and the Star Wars franchise is still hurt. Disney, if you're watching this, don't mess up future Star Wars projects. If you do, I am putting a lawsuit on your company for offending me and the Star Wars fandom. It is just... You've done some good things, Disney, but this is just too far. You better not mess it up next time. I expect better from you, and if you mess up again, I will find you. See you in the next one!